1. Fragments of Silicon keeps you warm even in the winter. All right, so welcome to another installment of the Fragments of Silicon Daylight interviews. So joining us this week is Connor Rush of FYRE Games.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Hopefully it's not too cold and snowy where you are.
Oh, it is nothing but cold and snowy where I am. I'm in Pittsburgh and we got, gosh, I want to say like near 20 inches. Like it's close. It's absurd actually.
Hmm. Like you're gonna need less snow shovel and more a flamethrower.
Oh, we're about there. I let my dog out to use the bathroom and like his whole lower half disappears. He's just trudging through that snow and he's a trooper for it.
Indeed. Anyway, so weather aside, how we like to get started is we like to get to know the person behind the studio, the games, and all of that assorted business. And we begin that journey by asking this particular question: what got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
Ah, man. So my dad, when he was in college, I was super young, and I remember in his apartment, he had a PS2, and the PS2 was like my first introduction to gaming. Really, some of the games I can like think of off the top of my head were Kingdom Hearts 2, which is to this day like one of my favorites of all time, as well as like Jack and Daxter 2, and I remember I picked up like Lego Star Wars as well. And I was just kind of astounded playing this game. And like, this is going to sound strange because we kind of know how games work now, but just as a little kid, I would like press the jump button and then watch this image on the TV also jump. And it kind of just like blew my mind that that was possible and I could control something happening on the screen. And I in my little kid brain was like, I'm going to figure out how to do that. So at the age of like 10 years old or something, I downloaded Unity and just started messing around and kind of taught myself how to code and put games together. Until at the age of around 13, I released my first one under FYRE Games. And like those early influences are there. Then I got into like the PS3 with Little Big Planet and its subsequent sequels, which really got me into that game development like creative headspace. And I do credit Little Big Planet to this day as being kind of the catalyst for me becoming a game developer. On top of that, the works of Naughty Dog had a big influence on me. If for nothing else, then they really showed me the storytelling potential of video games, which then got me into things like the walking sim genre, Firewatch, What Remains of Edith Finch, and like general horror stuff has always kind of intrigued me. So just blending all that together to find me where I am today, making these narrative horror games that I love so much.
Okay. Um, I think you might be the first dev we've had on the program that cited Little Big Planet's creation tools as a reason to get into game development. I suppose
It's
it would have happened at some point.
it is a looking back a pretty phenomenal starting point in terms of game design and game development logic. I took my college my college degree is in computer science, and I remember some of my introductory computer science courses, they were showing us like logic gates, like AND gates, OR gates, XOR gates, and the symbolism used and just the visual language of it was the exact same as Little Big Planet. So me being whatever age I was when that game came out, it was like a PS3 launch title, I
Mhm.
believe. Uh, I was unknowingly teaching myself code through those games, which is still like, you know, pretty insane to me. Or no,
Mhm.
no, I think the logic gates came with Little Big Planet too.
Yeah,
Anyways,
it
yeah,
was
I was,
two, yeah. And
yeah,
like pretty
yeah,
much the
I was,
only limitation you had was how much memory the PS3 realistically had left after starting the game.
yeah. But yeah, I was just unknowingly learning code through that and, breezed by my initial college courses. And then I was like, oh, wait, I have to learn new stuff now. And then things got harder. But we powered through. I got my degree. We're out of there. I'm just making games now, and I'm happy to be doing it.
Okay. And how long ago did you make the jump, so to speak, into what we call professional game development?
Oh, man, I think. Sorry,
As in
continue.
putting games onto Steam.
Yeah, I mean, my first one I launched on Steam in 2016. I would have been 13 or 14 at the time. And that was Into the Unknown. It's still on Steam now. It's free. It's not good. If you want to hear 13-year-old me voice acting, that's the great place to do it. But I started very young just because I've always had a drive to make things, and I'm kind of going nuts if I'm not making something. Whether it's that or like my music stuff. I do a lot of music. Um, it's just always been there. I've always had the need to do something with myself.
Mm. And this may be a hard question to answer, but I suppose it's worth asking nonetheless. And how have you progressed over the course of what is it, 8 years?
Be about 10 now. I'm 24 now.
Anyway, um from Into the Unknown to um the thing that we're primarily going to be talking about today, Project Songbird.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I view every game I develop as a learning experience of sorts, right? Like I started off not knowing what I was doing, and I threw Into the Unknown together. And of course, 13-year-old me was like, "Oh, this is the greatest game ever made because I made it and it's so good." And then it got like, raked over the coals on Steam, uh, which for like a little kid, or I guess teenager at that point, does hurt. It doesn't feel good to have your work like totally um skewered isn't the right word, but like rightfully criticized for what it is. So I've taken every game since as just this learning experience where, hey, I'm still teaching myself. I've never formally learned game development, and every game I make is just me refining my skills for the next one. And I think Project Songbird is no different. Granted, Project Songbird is the biggest thing I've made. It's the most professional thing I've made. It's the first time I've, hired people. I've gotten contract work. I've, gotten a publisher. This is the first time I've like put money into something. And I think my ambition has finally met my skill level where I'm able to achieve a bigger project like that. There have been times in the past where I've tried to do these bigger games and just totally fumbled it because I wasn't to that point yet, and I've had the decade now to refine those skills, and I'm very excited to see what the next decade entails and how my games improve even more from here.
And was there like a specific thing that made you feel like you were ready to attempt a bigger project again, or just a general sense of accomplishment?
I think a general sense of accomplishment and a just a better understanding of game development in general. Like even just from the technical side of things, you talk about like code logic and how to optimize a game and how Unity really works and how things are written and read. And just having that firmer understanding of the technical side of developing a project, and even branching out from technical, how to manage a project and how to keep a cohesive design and not explode out into scope creep where like you keep adding things that you may not even need in this game that just kind of adds to the bloat and the needless budget expense, needless effort expense. um, just kind of learning as I go about how to manage something bigger, both technically and socially, I guess.
Okay. And I suppose this is as good a time as any to get into it, so to speak.
Get into it.
Well, specifically Project Songbird. So I suppose the first question I have is that title. Is that the final title of the game?
Yeah, that is absolutely the final title of the game.
Okay, just wanted to make sure because usually when we hear Project something, that's usually a very, placeholdery name.
Mhm.
Like, so that being said, what is the Project Songbird?
So Project Songbird, I guess if I'm giving a brief overview of what this game is, Project Songbird is a first-person cinematic narrative horror game where you play as Dakota, a musician who isolates themselves in the remote Appalachian forest amidst a writer's block to record their newest album. A lot of classic survival horror influence there, but it also has that element of the walking sim that I mentioned before, just really loving. What Remains of Edith Finch and Firewatch are two of my favorites, and those can very clearly be seen in the final product of Project Songbird, I think. But the title itself has a lot of thematic meaning. And in full transparency, it did start as an in development title. We had our themes in place, and it was like, oh, Songbird fits a lot of this, like, thematic relevancy of the game. So hence Project Songbird. But as development progressed, it became very clear that the way the story was going and a lot of the sorry, I'm trying to think of my wording without spoiling the story here, which I don't plan to do. Um,
Right.
the title has a lot of relevance, and I think after playing the game, that relevance will be clear. And I'm just excited for people to pick up on that when the time comes.
No, hopefully that will be the case. And yeah, it's like talking about something that is narrative heavy, especially in development, is kind of hard
Yeah.
because there's a limit to what we can delve into.
The big thing I kept getting asked. So I do a lot of social media stuff as well. And I used to do it more generally, and now it's primarily in service of my game development work. I would often get requests like, could you live stream your development, or could you like start Twitch streams? And on the surface, I thought that's an awesome idea. I'd love to do that. But then I thought, man, all of this is so story focused. I feel like showing anything is going to like spoil environments or characters or story beats. So doing stuff like that is trickier. I found a good balance on my social media of how to promote without throwing out what everything in the game is. But it was hard finding that point.
Hmm.
And what is the balance there?
I think I've found a lot of success in as ego driven as it might sound. I like promoting myself to an extent with my content in the way that I'd like people to be drawn to me as a developer, and I think in the long term that will pay off as a, oh, this is the guy that made that thing I like, or this is the guy who I enjoy seeing come up on my page. I'd love to see what he makes next, or I'd love to follow his development journey. And on top of that, I think Project Songbird has a great atmosphere. I think it has good visuals to throw out there on social media, and people seem to really resonate with the look and feel of it. Throwing out some, reference games, like I said, Edith Finch. On top of like those survival horror games, Alan Wake, Resident Evil, Silent Hill. Being able to like mention these things on a page kind of gets people interested and gets people involved, and I'm glad it does because they're not inaccurate descriptors. So I can really get people to like feel something for this game and connect themselves to it off the bat.
Well, the thing of it is, modern day indie horror games are not too far off the mark from walking simulators, as they're called, um, given their structure, themes, and just how they play out. Like, what is the difference between, say, going home and something like Outlast?
I think, hmm, this would be a question I'd want to like sit over for a bit and like analyze the stories of each. But if I have to go like right off the bat, I would say a lot of it comes down to tone, thematics, and I guess the personality of the narrative. And that's not to say like the narrative itself, like what personality it holds, but more just how intimate and personal to the characters it can be. And I think with Project Songbird, I'm doing something more akin story wise to Gone Home, right? Where it is very much like these characters being studied, and having these arcs between acts and watching people grow and change over the course of however long the game is.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Um, it's also uh, gameplay is a big factor in
Hmm.
that. Uh, like we've seen in the footage that your character is holding an axe. Does that
Yes.
get swung?
Yeah, yeah, and there's some B-roll there I sent as well, which has a lot more than axes too.
Yeah.
You get a few weapons. There's some firearms. There's an axe. There's throwables. Um, because this game, like when I started development, was very inspired by Resident Evil, particularly the newer Resident Evils. I believe I
Mm.
was playing Village around the time Songbird was being conceptualized, and I just always found the current rendition of Resident Evil games super snappy, like super satisfying to play. And I wanted to pursue something in that nature. So there are those survival horror light elements. There is the combat, the limited resources, the exploration and puzzle solving to some of these levels. But I wanted to balance that out with the style that I've become more accustomed to I've grown as a developer, which is that like first person narrative genre. So you'll the way I've been pitching it is imagine Resident Evil if more of the game's runtime was dedicated to telling a personal story and dedicated to having these slower exploration section and these slower periods of building this atmosphere and letting these characters talk with one another or just talk to themselves. And I think it is a cool balance, and I really am looking forward to seeing how people respond to it. I'm hoping positive. All of the initial reactions have been very positive, which is very assuring.
Hmm. And how do you reconcile that with the more narrative heavy approach here?
In what sense do you mean? Could you elaborate on the question a bit?
Well, once again, you've been name checking, so-called walking simulators and stuff that, well, it's in the title there, walking simulators. You're walking, and it's just all about the narrative, and there's no quote unquote traditional gameplay elements. Whereas this is very much um, filled with traditional gameplay elements, which changes things.
I would say the game itself still falls in line with being in that, narrative walking sim genre for a lot of it. But I consider the gameplay mechanics that are there to be complements to the engagement of the experience. You'll find these pockets of puzzle solving and combat that I think work to add just another layer to this game as a storytelling device and as something to amplify what this game is pursuing to some extent, which is the fear of it. I've always found that games like Outlast and a lot of these like run and hide type horror games that have become popular recently kind of lose some of the fear factor, to me at least, due to the lack of combat. I think providing combat and providing options to a player sort of amplifies the agency of it and increases what I feel is a risk factor in the design that I think makes it scarier, ironically. And I kind of wanted to capture that. If I'm pursuing this horror game feel, I would like to give the player some agency to approach it how they feel. And it gives, I think, the enemies a bit more weight. It gives the danger a bit more weight. And I think that lends itself well to the narrative being told.
That is interesting. Because, yeah, it does fly in the face, so to speak, of modern indie horror conventions, which honestly I think is a good thing because honestly, that gameplay loop has been prominent in the field for a good 15 or so years, maybe 16. Whenever Amnesia: The Dark Descent came out,
Mhm.
We've essentially been doing permutations on that for a decade and a half. So, when you're doing something for that long, a bit of staleness is going to creep in.
Yeah, for sure. But I do think there's room where that genre still definitely works. Like for me, I do love Outlast. And Outlast I think is a great modern example of that, run and hide formula like working to its fullest. And I also think it's a great entry point for a lot of developers. That and with this general walking sim genre, you can create some excellent things following this framework. But for me, doing the walking sim genre for as many times as I have, I did want to branch out and kind of throw myself into a zone I'm less comfortable in the way to grow as a developer. Um, but you'll never catch me talking bad about these the I say run and hide. I don't know if that's a derogatory term. That's kind of just what I've learned the genre to be. So I do apologize if that's coming off as insulting to these games. I don't mean it to be. But I think there's a lot of merit in them, and you'll never catch me talking bad about them. I love the stuff.
I mean, it's not inaccurate. It's perhaps a bit of a dry uh, explanation of the genre, but it's certainly what you do basically in all of these games. To that effect, is there any, hiding in lockers in your game?
Not in lockers. There is stealth as an option. In the same way, there's stealth as an option in um, let's say Silent Hill F, right? That recently, which I very much enjoyed. But you, as much as I did not, you can stealth in that game, and I wanted to approach the design of the gameplay in Project Songbird as you could run, fight, or hide. And all of them should be valid options for your playstyle. You could run away in the event you'll probably get hit a few times, take some health. You could try to stealth your way through, and there are some tools at your disposal to help you in that stealth. Or you can go in, start firing bullets, alert enemies, swinging that axe. And I want all to feel fun in their own way.
Well, that's good, I suppose. And circling to something else we've touched upon but haven't really delved into too deeply, and that is the survival horror. Like, okay, are you going to have limited resources in your game? And if so, what is being restricted here?
So the resources are limited. Whenever I tell people about the survival horror elements of Project Songbird, I always pitch it as survival horror light. It's not that full on Resident Evil style tracking your inventory, making sure you find the safe room type thing. But there are, scarce ammo. There is scarce healing items. You have limited battery on your flashlight. And all these little things that I think lend to, like I said before, that fear factor of the gameplay. There's that degree of puzzle solving. There are those surreal Silent Hill style puzzles, surreal Silent Hill style environments to that extent. which actually, funny enough, I only just recently played the Silent Hill, started playing the Silent Hill games, and I am in love with them so much. They're so good. But the general like tone around those has had a big influence on creating that gameplay.
And to that effect, and this is something that uh not a lot of people give a lot of thought to. That's the melee combat. How is
Mhm.
that going to be handled?
So melee, I want to feel weighty, in the way that there's a good portion of the game where you only have access to melee combat as defense. Melee in this game is treated as, using the axe, and the axe is both a tool for offense and defense. So you can block with that axe, reduce damage, get up close to the enemy, and even parry the enemy. And this can be used in gameplay as a way to, not only, I guess, stun the enemy to get away, but also to stun the enemy to deal extra damage if you decide to take that combat route. So the axe is a bit multifaceted in that sense. And on top of that, again, you could just swing it and you could just start hitting enemies. But if you are engaging in that melee combat, blocking and parrying are pretty essential into not getting killed very quickly.
That's very modern. Like, uh, at least it's not using a revolver to block a chainsaw.
What was that? Oh
One of
goodness.
the worst moments of Resident Evil 7. I'll say it right now. Like, like that took me a while because I would not think to block a chainsaw with a gun. Like, that
Oh,
was
I
just,
I love it. I love Resident Evil when it gets real camp. It's so
that's
fun.
not camp. That's just stupid.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, I think it
that's
is
just,
pure camp.
no, like there are parts that are pure camp. There are parts that are just dumb. Anyway, now once again, bringing up Resident Evil and more pertinently Silent Hill, is the combat going to be graceful or clunky?
Um, You know what? I'm gonna combine. I'm gonna say gracefully clunky. That doesn't make sense, but I did by design want the combat to feel a bit slow. You're not a Resident Evil style soldier. You are
Right.
much more in line with being a James Sunderland. You are just a dude, in this forest that found weapons, and
Mm.
you're defending yourself to the best of your ability. So things are a bit slower. Your aim is kind of shaky. The guns are kind of slow, but I wanted those hits to feel less graceful and more heavy. So when you do hit with that axe, it does feel heavy. When you fire that gun, it feels like you just used a big resource. So definitely on the clunkier end of that Silent Hill side of the spectrum, but very much by intent.
I guess, is it so clunky that your main mode of play is more to evade the enemy, or is there points where combat is required? It's just not as graceful as, say, if you were someone who was more trained.
There is no point in the game that I think I'm trying to like comb through the game in my head. I don't believe there's any points where combat is a necessity.
Mm.
I think at any point in the game you can run or sneak past. But I actually have been like, in light of demo feedback, because the demo is out now,
Yeah.
been refining the combat a lot, specifically with animations and transition states. So there used to be like a pretty slow swing animation and a pretty slow transition from like blocking to readying the axe to swing, which was a bit skewed too far in the clunky end of things. And I've been trying to refine that to be a bit quicker, a bit more responsive. And I'm excited to get those updates out with the upcoming Steam Next Fest. There are a few things we're looking to change just stylistically and aesthetically that should be done before that demo gets updated. And I'm so excited to get all that stuff up so that people can play the new and improved Project Songbird gameplay.
Mm.
So does that mean there's going to be another demo released before the game gets released properly?
not a new demo, more just some big gameplay improvements, performance improvements, general optimizations to the current demo. On top of just some aesthetic things, we've changed some of the environments a tad bit, compressed some textures so this build size is down like a gig, which I'm so happy with. The RAM performance, we're buttery smooth. That was mostly with the console ports coming out. We had to work on
Yeah.
a lot of that.
Because
Which
unfortunately,
I
you
was
can't
shocked.
shove another stick of RAM in your console.
I was shocked to learn how little RAM you get with the Xbox for a gaming console. Like, man, I have access to like nothing on the Series S.
Yeah.
Well,
But
the
that
Series
that's
S is
kind of
the
the
low end.
rub. Yeah, that's kind of the rub, though, Adam. They have to be able to work on the S and the X.
Right, right. Lowest common denominator
Exactly.
development.
But
Right.
I think I get like somewhere in the realm of 6 gigs of RAM, which isn't a lot when you think of like modern gaming. Because
Right.
I don't know the amount they have on the station, but a lot of it is like dedicated to OS stuff. Um,
I
so
think I
that was
think
a
they're
challenge.
using, I want to say, a 12 gigs, but it's been a while since I've seen the documentation. I could be wrong.
But all that aside, we've been doing a lot with compressing stuff and getting it more RAM friendly. So the lower end machine should be able to run this demo a lot better, and the higher end machine should be able to run it a lot smoother.
Mm.
So I'm excited to roll all this out.
Mm. And when do you think those improvements will hit the demo?
I'm not sure. We are doing a redesign on the enemies right now, which is the thing I'm most excited to have hit that demo. The remodel and redesign should be done before this month is over. So either today or tomorrow that should be in. And then we're going to reanimate them, get them looking a little freakier, which is going to be. Uh, I'm excited. One thing that I heard from the demos, a lot of people didn't find the enemies scary, so I was like, all right, challenge accepted. Let's get this thing scaried up. So I reached out to my modeler friend, reached out to my animator. I was like, hey, let's figure out how to make this like 2 times, 3 times, 4 times scarier. And based on everything I've seen so far, it's working.
It's time to
Oh, I
introduce.
just did a little bit of live research. The Series S has 10 gigabytes of RAM, but that's all total, including used by the GPU.
Yeah, so if you're like thinking about the modern gaming PC, which has
Hmm.
like, I feel like at least 16 gigs, the Series S is not giving you a lot to work with,
Oh no,
which
no, it
has
is
been
not.
which has been a fun challenge as a developer, but it's a challenge I've taken on, confidently, and we've got it there. We actually just sent the console versions to QA, like not internal QA, like PlayStation and Xbox
Yeah.
QA to like be approved for release.
To make sure it's not
And
going to turn the system into a bomb.
to make sure we're not bricking Xboxes or anything.
Yeah.
So if
Or I
that's not
guess
the
also
case,
hacking Xbox Live, because that's an entirely different thing people have gotten in trouble for recently.
oh man, but I think we're good for console release now. I'll hear in the next 2 weeks or so if we're like greenlit to just hit the release button, and then it'll just be like general improvements until launch, which is a great position to be in as a developer.
Indeed. It sounds like, fingers crossed, knock on wood, and all that stuff, but you will be on time for your launch day.
Yeah, that I even told the publisher at one point, like, hey, we have this one date set, let's push it back. Not because I don't think we could hit it, is because I want to be sure that we have the absolute best thing possible ready to release without delay. I would like to have our date, release on that date, and have a fully functional, well made product on that date. And that's just to avoid any sort of rush.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. And who are you working with to bring this game to consoles, I assume?
Yeah, yeah. So my current publisher is Dojo System. They also released, and this is kind of how I got in touch with them. Among Ashes, which was a very good game, which I think is similar in scope and in a lot of ways gameplay to Project Songbird. It's got that first person narrative combined with the survival horror type feel. And it's an incredibly good game. And I saw that on the PlayStation Store. I was like, who published this? Let's see if they, want another game to publish. And I'm coming from a point of I'm a small developer. In fact, I'm a one-man developer. So I don't have like my name out there attached to a big product yet. I need to find someone small who is willing to work with me where I'm at. And I just cold emailed them and was like, hey, I saw you did this game for consoles. Would you want to do the same for me? I got the PC release handled. Like, you don't need to worry about that. Would you want to handle PlayStation? And they were like, yeah, let's do it. So they ported it. They got it localized for me, which I am super appreciative of. So we're now launching in 5 different languages, which would not have happened if I didn't have that publisher. And we have gotten a lot of good marketing opportunities, like the release date trailer that just came out on PlayStation, which, being able to partner with PlayStation was a huge honor for me. And they're sending me all sorts of stuff for showcases that I'm applying for, and just it's been a very nice partnership, and I'm very happy to have them.
Well, that's good.
It's for a lot of devs. It seems like mostly for publisher, they're using them for like console ports and localization because they can get most of the development
QA
done
too.
themselves. Yeah, QA as well.
I agree. I like being as independent as possible, but there are some places where the resources are just kind of too extensive. Before I looked into a publisher, I was like, let's see about porting it myself. Can I get this on PlayStation myself? 'Cause I've never done it. I'm just curious. Like, I would love to learn how to do this. Let's just see if I can. So I was able to get my PlayStation like partners account made, and I had like the whole back end set up. I was like, all right, let's see about the porting. So I don't know how much you guys know about game development in general, but I'm going to talk some game dev. And if anyone in the audience is listening and knows all this, apologies. I, one, needed a dev kit, like a dev console for each console, which could be upwards of like $2,000, which, like, okay, like $4,000 to $5,000 expense. That's a lot of money, but it's a one-time thing. And maybe I'll do this again in the future. So maybe it's worth throwing down that money to get the dev consoles. But I'm also using Unity as my engine, which does not come built in with the free version to be able to port. So I literally cannot make a console version of the game without pro licenses to Unity, which cost absurd amounts of money because they are these like enterprise packages. Actually, I'm looking up the rates right now. License cost. So Unity Pro as of January 2026 is over $2,000 a year, which is far outside of my budget as a recent college grad. So I was like, okay, we're not doing this. Let's find a publisher.
Yeah, if everyone's wondering why a lot of Unity games still have the Made in Unity logo in it, because they don't have the money for the full release.
So that's actually not the case anymore.
Oh.
As of, I think, a year or two ago, Unity disbanded that, and I think that it was an incredibly smart move. So I'm using the Unity Free Edition, and I don't have the Unity logo anymore. That is now an optional feature. I think that is a very good move on Unity's end.
I think part of that is just to distance themselves from some of the shovelware stuff, honestly.
Yeah,
Because there was a slew of people who were just making cheap asset flips, and blazoned on the front of it was made in Unity, and it kind of gave a bad rep for the engine.
I agree with that statement, but in a less, because when you say like, oh, these asset flip shovelware whatever, I don't want to approach that with like malice though, right? Because I think Unity is an excellent engine for both new and professional developers. And I think the issue came in when these professional developers were using the pro license and not showing that logo, but maybe like a new learning developer would download Unity and release their game on Steam, itch, whatever else with the Unity logo attached. And there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. Like, developers start somewhere. My first game, Into the Unknown, had that Unity logo and was not a good game.
Yeah.
But I was learning. I was 13. I was figuring it out. And I think not necessarily saying these shovelware asset flips, whatever, but just like new developers trying something, and would show.
I don't want to sound like an asshole. There is a difference between a new developer and people like Digital Homicide, who were literally doing this maliciously and then going after people who called them out.
Yeah. It like combining all these things together, just showing these what I guess the general public would call like a quote unquote low quality game,
Mhm.
did give Unity kind of that bad reputation, and I think removing that necessity to show the logo was a very good move
Yeah.
on their part. Because so many great games were made with Unity that you never know.
Yeah.
I've mentioned a few times already, Firewatch is a Unity game and it's excellent. It looks beautiful.
And there are quite a few AAA games that are using Unity, but you wouldn't know unless you went through the credits.
Could you give me one? Only because I'm like struggling to think off the top of my head.
Bandai's been using it a lot. Digimon Next Order was built in Unity. I
Really?
believe Katamari was the new one.
They might have they might have used the Unity wrapper. Like I don't know.
Possibly. I might
I'm
actually have to look
looking up
this up.
Cuphead, Kerbal Space Program, Subnautica,
Yeah.
Tarkov.
Hmm.
That I forgot Tarkov was in Unity. Yeah.
Like Unity's an excellent engine, especially if you know what you're doing. I think it's just so scalable to whatever skill level you're currently at. Um, that you can make some pretty crazy stuff with that if you're like familiar with its architecture.
Right. And so switching gears here a bit because I do want to at least attempt to dive into the narrative a bit.
Mhm.
And we can do some surface level stuff, as in, like, who are you? What are you doing? That sort of thing.
Yeah. Um, so I'll just restate the pitch from before. You're Dakota, who is a career musician, and
Hmm.
has been kind of stuck in this writer's block for a couple months. Is overdue on their contract to get their label a new album, and the label's trying to be understanding, but is like, hey, we need this money. You're not getting the tracks we need made. You're making some songs, but the audience is not resonating with them. We need a classic album from you, like the sound that your fans like are drawn to. Then the label is like, hey, I got the lead of the label, like the individual guys, like I got this buddy in West Virginia. He's got a cabin that he rents out. Would you be interested to go to this cabin for a month? I've heard of musicians like, isolating for a bit, getting into nature, like figuring themselves out and coming out with like the best work they've ever made, which has happened with a few bands, right? Like Bon Iver did it. Panic at the Disco did it with Pretty Odd. Just a lot of bands have done that whole off the grid, let's make an album thing. Um, so I kind of drew inspiration from that. So Dakota is like, yeah, let's try it out. I'll go to this cabin for a month. Let's get an album made. And then, of course, it's a horror game inspired by Silent Hill and Alan Wake. So stuff gets weird and stuff gets scary.
As ironically you would expect it to be, given its genre setting.
Mhm.
Right. Uh, and in terms of the music, uh, are you composing it, or are you getting someone else to do that?
So not predominantly. Fun fact: I'm in a band as well, called Auric Echoes. We do like some post punky jazz rock type stuff. A lot of inspiration from Black Midi. A lot of the Brixton windmill scene out of London, not London, Brixton. You know what I mean. But a lot of these bands we're taking inspiration from. My bandmates did a lot of the music for Project Songbird. Primarily our guitarist Jacob Noska. He did the score with nearly like 20 original tracks that are all gorgeous. He's a big post rock guy. He loves the jangly guitars, the clanky metal sounds that drone on into ambience. And that was the exact thing I was looking for out of this score. And he killed it. In addition, my band's drummer, Jonah Henthorn, who's also my band's engineer, he did the In Universe album. So obviously Dakota is recording this album in the woods, and I thought, well, I can't have that be the story and not have an album to show the player. So Jonah did a 10-track album that is so fun and so catchy, and I catch myself listening to it like not in development. It's a lot of really good music. And in addition, I did a few tracks for the score. My additional bandmates, Erwin Dorsonville and Tyler Rozier, also did some songs for the score just to kind of fill in the space where needed. And I'm just overwhelmingly happy with the music of this game. It's actually one of the main compliments I get when people play the game is how much they enjoy the music.
Is this album available externally, or is it only in the game?
I'm hoping to make it available externally. Actually, I haven't planned the full release of that yet, but we're working on plans. I think the score, if you're counting the score and the In-Universe album, we're looking at about 37 tracks.
Hmm.
Uh, so it's a hefty release. I'm kind of just thinking how we want to work that currently, but I do plan, hopefully at some point, to have it out externally.
Hmm.
I don't want to forget, there's also a whole um licensed soundtrack, I guess, to this game as well. Dakota, I wanted to paint them as a very, passionate musician, and they do really love music.
Hmm.
So I created this public call for indie musicians like, hey, Dakota would totally have a record collection. Would you guys want your music featured in this record collection? Submit your music to be featured in the game. We'll get it all sorted out. So I have, I think, 21 different small bands, indie artists featured in this record collection. So you can kind of just peruse Dakota's records, put something on, listen to some music, maybe find your new favorite band.
Now, are these all like set to be like stream safe? Like people aren't going to be like DMCA'd if they accidentally have some of this stuff show up, or
The beauty of the system is that you don't have to engage with it at all. So there's
okay.
actually a disclaimer at the start of the game. It's like, hey, Dakota has a record collection. It's all real music. If you're streaming it, play it at your own discretion. You might
Mm,
get a strike for it. But if you're not streaming, if you're not publicizing this anywhere, go nuts. It's great stuff.
mm. Definitely, yeah. It's one of those things that a lot of people don't put that in there, and like, oh no, my 3 hour VOD is now nuked from existence because there was a copyrighted song in there. Well,
Yeah.
crap.
But no, the record collection is totally like optional. It gives you like a list of the songs, and I think it's pretty clear. Like, oh, these
Mm,
are actual tracks. You see
yeah.
the album cover and everything.
Hmm.
Um, and again, that big notice, and it says in big letters, "Content Creator Notice."
Yeah,
Uh,
that is
so
good.
anything that's not optional should be fine.
All right.
And on that note, when is the game coming out?
Project Songbird. At least the plan is to launch March 26th of this year.
Okay, that's not too far away.
Not too far.
I mean, about 2 months, maybe a little less.
Yeah, a little less than 2 months. It is surreal, man. I've been working on this thing for like 4 years now. Granted, it's been on and off. I was in school, and then I had my first like real in-office game developer job, and the time to work on this game was minimal. But over those 4 years, I found the time, and especially right now, I'm dedicating everything to getting this game in the best shape it can be and getting it out the door to all of you listening.
Hmm. And have you settled on a price yet?
I have not. I have my thoughts. Publisher has their thoughts. We're currently discussing it, negotiating like how much we want to charge for this thing, and any additional releases that come after this. I'm hoping to have an official price soon. And as soon as I do, I'd love to start maybe taking pre-orders. I guess that's a limitation on the Xbox Store page as well. So once those pre-orders are able to go live, we'll have the Xbox Store page live.
Mm.
All right. And I suppose my final question at this stage is: have you given any thought to bringing this game to the Switch family of platforms and/or mobile?
So currently there are no plans for a Switch or mobile release, mostly because we are utilizing the Unity high definition render pipeline, which is notoriously not the most performant, especially on lower end hardware.
Hmm.
Granted, I've gotten the game to a pretty performant state considering the HDRP usage. So it's running really smoothly on consoles and PC. But to optimize it down to the Switch and for especially mobile devices might be trickier. I'm not shutting it down immediately. I'd love to explore it, but no promises getting made now.
Would you see it look into the Switch 2 as a possibility?
I'm not sure. So full disclosure, I have not owned a Nintendo console since the Wii,
Mm,
and I am not super familiar with the hardware. I'd be curious what it's able to run, how well.
yeah.
If it's a lot more powerful than the original Switch, that could be a possibility.
I've been seeing stuff. It's pretty just below the Series S.
Okay, there may be that could be an option,
Hmm.
but no official plans at the moment.
Mm,
So no one get their hopes up yet.
yeah.
That would be a
That one's
discussion to be
definitely
had.
needs some investigation first, because
Yeah.
you're also basically going to be putting this on Android if you go with Nintendo, because that's what they use as the back end of their OS. So there is definitely some testing and stuff that needs to happen with that.
I didn't know that. This is all news to me. Again, I'm very out of the loop when it
Mm,
comes to Nintendo consoles in general. Nintendo anything.
Duly noted. All right then. So yeah, Connor, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule and being with us here today to talk about your game. It's certainly been a enlightening conversation.
Well, I want to thank you guys for having me. It's an honor to have been reached out to and to be considered for this.
Indeed. And yeah, so the game is Project Songbird. Um, it doesn't have its own Steam page yet from the looks of things.
No, it does.
Oh, it does. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry about that. There's actually quite a few entries here, so it's hard to parse it out among your other releases. But right, so yeah, Project Songbird is got a demo if you want to try before you buy, um, and it's coming March 26th, I
Yep.
believe.
Yeah.
All right, so be sure to go and wishlist it on Steam today. All right, then. So, yeah, that'll about do it for another installment of Fragments of Silicon, the Daylight interviews. So, be sure to tune in tonight, about 10 o'clock, I'm thinking.
mm.
That may be a bit adjusted depending on circumstances, but, we will be doing a multiplayer mayhem fest on the game Puzzle Parasite. So look forward to that. And until next time, I shall wish you good gaming.